By popular demand, we're here with Orcs and Goblins. This is one of the factions I think that, depending on how you were playing, might have changed the most. I think, realistically, the top-level competitive build that people were winning tournaments with, that has gotten significantly worse, in fact doesn't exist anymore, but I think the rest of the army's actually gotten better. So if you weren't doing massive units of teleporting Night Goblins, you're probably pretty happy about a lot of the changes. Let's have a quick look through the specific changes for Orcs and Goblins. First of all, release the Fanatics. Unless it's a fleeing or in a marching column, a concealing unit may release one or more of its Fanatics during any starter turn subphase. This is obviously worse than it was. Previously, you could just release Fanatics at any point, no matter what. But I also think it doesn't necessarily matter with how Orcs and Goblins are going to play. Obviously, if you're fleeing, you won't be able to get, release the Fanatics, which is just a flat-out nerf for how the army plays, but it also makes sense thematically. But not being able to do it in marching column, I think, is absolutely fine. It means that you're less able to be aggressive with the Fanatics, but they still work really well as a defensive tool. And I think that's the sort of playstyle that Orcs and Goblins Grand Army, which is the only place you can take Night Goblins, I think that's the sort of playstyle that we're going to see things going towards. So this is a change. I'm not too upset about it. I think if you're using the Night Goblins as defensive bunkers, you won't be either. Troll mobs can now take different weapons in a unit, and also get Motley Crew to allow them to use different weapons. Again, from a game balance perspective, I'm not really bothered about this. This is just nice for letting people use stuff in their collection, which is always a good change to have. Porco's Pig Sticker, this is just the change that we've seen for multiple weapons, and there's later on Detachment Axe as well. Just clarifying that you only get the strength and AP modifiers, if those weapons have them, on the units that you've changed. This is a change coming in, saying that if you've changed with a weapon that only gives you a bonus on the turn you've charged, you can only use it against a unit you've charged. So if you overrun into another unit, which counts as a charge move, you get to use your lances, but you can't use those lances against something that charges you in the flank, which makes sense. You know, if you think about momentum, you hit them like that, they hit you like this. Obviously, you can't turn your lance sideways and jab them with it. So, fair enough there. It doesn't make much difference, just clarifies something in terms of like a less of a game balance style and more of a game fantasy style. Anyway, moving on. We've got a couple of spells here where the casting value has gone down. Brainburster down to 9, Mork's Curse down to 7. Neither of these spells were particularly seeing use. I don't hate Brainburster. It's a single strength 6 hit with no armor saves or regen, I believe, which does D3 wounds, and that's okay, but the problem is it's a signature spell. You're more likely to be taking Lore Familiar than you were previously. You can only take it on an Orc. Goblins have a really good signature spell already, or you might just be taking a signature spell from one of the lores you're in, so I don't necessarily see either of these being used all that much, but I'm not against options getting better. That is it for the changes here, and then if we go down to the Arata, we've got, again, for Kicknick, this is just clarifying that you can change weapons in step 1.1 of your Choose and Fight combat subphase, so that's just standardizing to the rest of the game. Fetid Whirlpool, this is again being standardized to other Vortex spells, so instead of being dangerous terrain, it's difficult terrain when you move over it, but if you move over it, you also take damage. So just a nice change there to make Vortex spells make more sense as to how they should work. You know, suspension of disbelief, that's the wording I was looking for previously. There's another 2 spells here that have gone down in casting value. Torrent of Filth is an assailment spell that I'm not... I guess you might get more use out of it, but I'm not necessarily super excited to cast it. Rapid Regeneration going down to 8 is quite nice. This is a spell that gives a regen save to a target unit within 12 inches. It's not a ranged self spell, so I do have some concerns about defensive spells that don't let you cast them into combat, but this is a really nice buff, and I think it makes Orcs and Goblins the only army in the game that can have a big brick of core with a ward save and a regen save. I'd have to double check that, but I can't think of any other armies off the top of my head. Undead. Sorry. The only non-undead army to have a ward save and regen save on a big brick of, say, something like Black Orcs, which I think is probably going to be a pretty good way of defensively holding positions. And then we talked about Detachment Axe as well here. Into the FAQs as well, Black Orc bosses can no longer take Black Orc chariots as a mount outside of, well, it specifically says here the Grand Army Composition list, so it just says that it's only available using the Nomadic War Army of Infamy Composition list, which is fine. Previously they could have done, now they can't. It thematically makes sense. You can only have it in the detachment where you can get it. It is a shame to lose the option. The Black Orc Chariot's really good, and it would have been something I'd have been happy to put my unit on, you know, my Lord on instead of a Wyvern, but, you know, by the by, this is a change here. It does have implications that Chaos Dwarves can't take the Black Orc Chariot anymore either, because it does specifically say you can only take it in the Nomadic War Army of Infamy. So, a bit of a nerf there to Chaos Dwarves as well, which is not what they were looking for. So what's a summary of the most important changes to Orcs and Goblins, including the stuff in the main FAQ? Fanatics, obviously we've talked about already. Stupidity, this is something that you need to know about, and it's kind of a buff, kind of a nerf. In fact, I'm going to bring up the exact wording, because it's quite important here, especially when we're talking about core units where you're interested in scoring. So if we look at the wording here for Stupidity, you can see that it's been changed to, unless fleeing or engaged in combat, it has to take a Stupidity test by testing against its leadership, so this is still fine, still the same. Start of turn, subphase, yada yada. If failed, it succumbs to Stupidity, and it gets the following restrictions. Cannot move, cannot shoot or cast spells, cannot attempt a wizardly dispel, must hold if charged by an enemy. So, what does this mean for Orcs and Goblins? Well, Stupidity is basically trolls. Or, no, I think it's basically trolls. I can't think of much else. Maybe there's other ways to apply it to characters. Yeah, I guess you could put the wizardly hat on someone if you really wanted to make your life harder. Anyway, you have to hold when charged by an enemy. This is a little bit of a nerf in terms of you not being able to move around the board, but in terms of the things that you've got it on, you're probably going to have, for example, we're talking about Troll Horde, big bricks of trolls that wanted to receive charges anyway because they're just a big brick of a big brick of wounds, a big brick of unit strength that's going to stand on top of an objective and try and score those points for as long as possible. They also hit really hard and they're very defensive. So as long as you're not removing their layered saves, their double regen save if you've got magical attacks or flaming attacks, as long as that's not the case, trolls are usually pretty happy to be charged in the front, so that's not an issue there. Can't attempt a wizardly dispel. This only really affects the troll hag, which is fine, a little bit of a shame. It also cannot shoot or cast spells. Again, a little bit of a shame for Troll Horde. Previously, you could fail your Stupidity test, then cast Big Smarts, the spell from Troll Horde, the Troll Magic Law, which allows you to re-roll fail Stupidity on the character that had failed Stupidity. Now you can't do that, so you lose a bit of reliability there if you're looking specifically at Troll Hags. And cannot move. I deliberately left this one to the end, because that sounds terrible. Previously, you could move up to your movement value, which felt weird, so instead of just sort of stumbling forwards, you just stood still and didn't do anything. Now you cannot move. This doesn't say you can't make a move. It doesn't say you can't, you know, do the movement action or anything like that. You just can't move. This means you have pseudo-unbreakable, because you can't move. So as long as you're not fleeing, because I believe the way that it works, if you broke from combat and fled, not a give ground or a fall back in good order, you would be caught and destroyed immediately if you got caught if you were fleeing because you didn't move and they always catch you. But assuming that you either give ground or fall back in good order and you can't move, you just stand there. You stay exactly where you were. Your opponent is stuck in combat with you. Obviously you can't follow up if you win combat, but yeah, this is not bad, I think. This is potentially a buff to big units of trolls that want to stand on objectives, because if you're standing as close to the objective as possible, i.e. on top of it, and your opponent charges you with something, they can't get you off unless they get you to break and flee, which is kind of hard to do given how resilient you are. So I think this is almost a stealth buff to trolls. Let me know how you feel about this in the comments, because this is a bit of a weird one. I feel like it's an unintended effect. Maybe it needs to be clarified. Maybe tournament organisers are going to clarify it as well, because it doesn't feel like it's necessarily how it's meant to work. But yeah, something that's stupid is going to stand there forever. So yeah, worth thinking about. Back to the changes, Regeneration. Regeneration has changed from being something that you take before you roll the dice. Sorry, before, previously, you take your armor save, ward save, regen, and then you'd roll multiple damage. This only matters for things that do multiple damage. Obviously, trolls have regeneration, so in this case, you're getting way more reliable at stopping damage. Let's say you get hit by a cannonball and it does 4 damage to a troll in Troll Horde, so you get to re-roll your regen save. You roll 4 5-up regens, you pass, let's say, 1 of them, then you get to roll another 3 5-up ward saves, you pass, let's say, 2 of them. In this case, you're cutting down the damage pretty significantly, and you know pretty accurately how much you're going to block. You're not gambling on, oh, do I manage to stop the entire thing because I rolled one of the 5s? Here it's going to be, oh, I definitely block a good chunk of the damage, or I'm very likely to block a good chunk of the damage. So this is a buff for anyone that was using Regeneration, especially with the rerolls in there. Impetuous. This is also a buff for Orcs and Goblins. Now, previously Impetuous was just a 50-50, if I want to charge, if I don't want to charge, I have to. At the start of the charge phase, you roll a d6 for each unit with Impetuous. On a 1, 2, 3, it has to charge. On a 4, 5, 6, it doesn't have to charge. You're allowed to do what you want with it. Now it's just a flat leadership test. You can't use Warband for it. That is something that has been clarified, which is a little bit of a shame for Orcs and Goblins, because obviously you can get very high leadership with them using Warband, but it does make sense. You wouldn't want your Orcs and Goblins to be more reliable than, let's say, the Dragon Princes that you can bring with only leadership 9, where you can get Orcs up to leadership 10. With that said, this is fantastic. It doesn't have the rider saying their own leadership or anything like that. It just says they've got to take a leadership test. So having an 18-inch bubble of good leadership is really nice to make it so your army's more reliable. For example, if you have a Black Orc and a Wyvern, even though it doesn't, it turns off Impetuous in a small bubble, it also gives a bigger bubble of good leadership to make it more likely for your army to pass. And I think that works really nicely thematically. You can have, the biggest, scariest orc on the back of the biggest, scariest monster that you've got access to, and that's going to help you keep your army under control. So I like that change in terms of just having a little bit more play with what you've got, and it feels more realistic in terms of unsupported units are more likely to do as they want as opposed to what they should do. Poison. Now, this is an out-and-out nerf for Orcs and Goblins. Poison has changed from being if you roll a 6, you auto-wound, to if you roll a 6, you get +2 to one of your wounds when you roll the wound dice. This is way worse. Previously, we would see Orcs and Goblins win events by running big bricks of 90 Night Goblins. They had Fanatics in there, they had loads of Wizards in there, and their gimmick was they had short bows, they had poison shots from the Spider Banner, and they would teleport around the board, they would hunt down dragons, they'd debuff them with multiple spells, and then they'd shoot them to death. And it was a very strong playstyle. That has died completely. You now not only can't do that with poison, you also, there's been a change to how large target vision works for units. If you have moved and you're in a unit, you can only shoot with 2 ranks. Normally you can shoot with 1 rank into just enemy models, and then large target gives you a 2nd rank. If you stay still, you can still volley fire, but it's still significantly less shots going into a large target. And again, if you move, you don't get to volley fire, so you get back to just having 2 ranks of models shooting, which is not a lot, especially by the time you put all of the characters in the front rank. So poison and large target shooting completely kills that build. However, it's still on one of the best units in the game. Well, sorry, one of the best units in the book. I think Night Goblins are very good, Fanatics are very strong, and I think that plays very well into the way that mission scoring is going to be. So we'll talk more about that when we get maybe to the Grand Army list building section of the book. Frenzy. Frenzy has been changed. This is one of the armies that I think suffers the most from the Frenzy change. Frenzy is, it used to be just +1 attack as long as you hadn't lost it. Frenzy is now +1 attack as long as you charge. So it's kind of like a worse Furious Charge, I would say. This is a problem, because if you're running maybe slightly more thematic lists, or you just want to try something different and run big bricks of infantry with Frenzy, you're probably not getting the charge a lot of the time, which means you're not getting the benefit of Frenzy. And if you lose that combat, in part because you have less attacks, then it's a problem, because you're going to lose Frenzy before you get to actually make attacks with it. Is it still good on something like Bboys? Yeah. If you've got the charge, if you've got the range to get in, if you can consistently be the one to get in there first, Frenzy is still that sort of normal force multiplier with all the normal restrictions where you lose control, you have to charge. But otherwise, it is worse, and you probably don't want to be taking it on big bricks of infantry. Even if you've got, a whole Savage Orc themed army, maybe it's something to consider. Or maybe you just do it anyway, because that's the sort of players that Orcs and Goblin players are. Vanguard. Vanguard has been nerfed in terms of now you cannot charge after you Vanguard on the first turn. This is a little bit of a hit to Nomadic War, but it's not a huge hit realistically, because you could buy it for the units, the Bboys, but you couldn't buy it for the characters. So you probably weren't running the units unsupported anyway. It's not really a huge change. by the time I got to sort of the end of where I was with playing with Nomadic War, I'd stopped taking Vanguard on my unit. So something to be aware about, but not something that's necessarily a massive change. The next big change for Orcs and Goblins is their casting changes. Previously, Orcs and Goblins were one of the armies that leaned on magic the most, and I think that's probably going to still happen to some degree, but there are some big changes that you need to be aware of. First of all, before, Orcs and Goblins had basically access to as many wizards as they wanted and were only capped to the amount of points they could spend on their characters. Now you can only take 1 level 4 wizard and up to 2 level 3 wizards at 1,000 points. Obviously, this is a huge change. Previously, you could go, I'm going to have 3 Goblin Oddnobs, I'm going to have 3 Night Goblin Oddnobs, I'll have 2 Orc Weird Knobs. You could just go to the, or Oddnobs, whatever the level 4 wizard is, you could just go to the point where you had more magic than anyone else in the game because you had so many different casters. I think there's 8 different casters you can run, if you factor in the Troll Hag, Ogdras as well. Yeah, loads of casters. Anyway, so you had access to more levels of wizardry than anyone else in the game, realistically. No access to spell reliability. That is part of the reason that we were seeing so many people running multiple wizards, because you had the access to Lore Familiar that everyone has. One wizard gets to pick their spells, but you didn't have anything like a spell familiar, and your wizards were so cheap. You'd see people go, oh, well, I really need this spell in War Magic. I'll just run 2 level 4s, and I'm almost guaranteed to get it. I'm very unlikely to not get the spell at least once. So that is now worse because you can't go multiple level 4s. You can only go, 1 level 4, 2 level 3s. You're dropping some level of reliability there. Realistically, if you wanted to go down this line, you still go a level 3 with Lore Familiar, a level 4 and a level 3. So it's not quite as bad as it could be. But that is a nerf to the access to reliability of spells. Again, Orcs and Goblins players probably not super bothered about that. Typically, you find that people who play Orcs and Goblins are more willing to engage with the randomness and fun aspect of the armies, which I respect. So these are changes to be aware of, but maybe you're not too bothered about them. Obviously, casting changes as well. We've seen casting values halved, so previously you were casting with +4 if you were level 4. Now the casting bonus you get from your level is half rounded up, so level 4s and level 3s only cast at +2, and that's something that Orcs and Goblins can deal with very well. There has been some rebalancing of the spell laws. 4 spells have gone down in casting value. The only one I really care about is Rapid Regeneration. And there's loads of changes in terms of how Dispelling works, in that Vortexes, and I'm sorry, this is maybe the one that's going to hurt the most. The Foot of Gork, the Vortex spell, now your opponent doesn't need to be in range of you to dispel it. They can dispel it from the range of the Vortex as well. So as much as people, Orcs and Goblin players love bringing modelled feet on large blast templates and then killing their entire army with it, it's going to be harder to do that. It's more likely that your opponent's going to dispel it. Maybe that's a buff, because I've seen it kill more Orc and Goblin models than I have seen it kill anything else. So maybe you're happy about that and you just want the opportunity to put it on the table, but not the opportunity to have it kill all of your own units. Who can say? Who can say? Now, where's the good news for Orcs and Goblin casting? Well, they have incredible access to casting and dispelling reliability, and by that I mean magic items that give them bonuses to doing so. You've got the Staff of Badoom, which is 55 points, and it gives you plus a D3 to your casting, I believe, and dispel roll, which is nuts. That's such good value. And again, you're not buying Lore Familiar or whatever on every character. You're probably going to have some characters that you're happy just to throw something like this on. This is huge. Obviously, if you miscast, or if you roll a double 1 or a double 6, it stops working and also does a large blast template fixed on top of you, on top of whatever you miscast if you roll the double 1. But you're Orcs and Goblins, you're unreliable. And this does give you good reliability to the spell at the risk of killing some goblins, which you didn't really care about. Also, we've got the Idols of Gork and Mork. These give you plus 3 inches to your range of casting or dispelling, respectively, and also let you reroll 1 cast a turn. Remember, you can't reroll a miscast. And then finally, you've got the Knobbly Staff, which is like Idol of Gork in that it gives you a reroll, but it also doesn't give you the extra range, and it's, I think, 5 points cheaper, something like that. So, not a great item, but if you really wanted to go full casting reliability, you could have 3 wizards with pluses or rerolls to their casting rolls. So, nice stuff there. Orcs and Goblins still looking pretty decent in terms of casting. Now, they don't have as easy access to magic resist as some of the other armies, looking at you, Empire and Warriors of Chaos, who've got a 20-point magic resist 2 item, but they do have their own tricks. They've got a couple of items in there. There's one which, instead of dispelling, if you cast a spell on the unit with the talisman inside. On a 2+, it bounces the spell back, or it cancels the spell. You know, they've got their own levels of reliability, and they do still have access to magic resist. So I think Orcs and Goblins can play very well in the casting magic landscape that we've got now. With that said, how are we thinking about the new laws? Because the laws that you take really affects in terms of which casters you can take, because unlike most other armies, Orcs and Goblin casters are very sort of pigeonholed into being, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. All of them can take wild magic. So, battle magic. Previously, this was the go-to for an evasive damage dealer. Honestly, I didn't see a lot of Orcs and Goblin players using this. I think we'll see people doing this sort of playstyle even less, because Pillar of Fire has been nerfed, and now you can't just drop that and do loads of damage with it. So we're probably not necessarily going to see an evasive damage dealer for Orcs and Goblins, mostly because you have to take this on an Orc Weirdnob, and the Orc Weirdnob isn't great in terms of getting around the edges, playing the evasive playstyle. If you wanted to do something like, you could take a Goblin Wizard. If Goblin Wizards on Wolves could take Battle Magic and, you know, use the reserve move of the Wolf Riders they were in, you'd probably see more of that. But Orc casters, different unit type, so they can join that unit. They're not in skirmish. Some issues there. Anyway, evasive damage dealer, don't necessarily see it being used in that way. But I do see it being used as a reliable piece of support for Death Stars. Why? Oakenshield casts on a 7. You can cast its range self, so if you're locked up in combat, you can cast it on yourself. This is fantastic. You can just give a large unit of, let's say, I don't know, Black Orcs, have a 5-up ward save. This is a huge boost to their reliability. I think this is going to be my go-to lore if I'm looking at Orcs and Goblins, despite there being some really other good stuff. And also Arcane Urgency. You can't you can't drop your Fanatics out of units now if you're in Marching Column. That is a real shame. What if I was just to go, okay, I'll just move a unit twice. I'll march it twice. It's going further than it would have done in Marching Column previously. Does need some, investment. I have to cast a spell on them, but you can still threaten, a unit moving 16 inches, dropping a Fanatic 3 inches away, and then doing some extra damage as well. Elementalism. This is just an all-round good lore, and I think Orcs and Goblins use this one really well, and it, in my opinion, supports a gunline Death Star really well. So that would be if you've got loads of Fanatics, you've got some ranged units, you've got a line of stuff that wants to stop your opponent from getting through to the back lines where all of the juicy damage is. So you're looking at, Doom Divers, maybe Rock Lobbers, maybe the Bolt Throwers as well. But you've got potentially still some units with bows. You're looking to just eke out that extra damage at range. You've maybe got some casters as well. You've got Ruby Ring of Ruin. You're trying to nerf the opponent's armor save, do as much damage as you can at range, and then use that sort of Fanatic line as a brick wall to stop them from getting to you and just eke out victories in that way. Ranged output support. That's the main thing that I think this is going to be supporting, and it does that very well. Obviously, Earthen Ramparts is an incredible spell. My issue is it's a high casting value, it's kind of hard to get off, and you need reliability for your ward saves, so that worries me. But I think Orcs and Goblins are one of the armies that benefit from this sort of style the most. Earthen Ramparts giving you the ward save, making it so your opponent loses their initiative on the charge. They only get to make one attack each because you're behind a linear obstacle. They lose their stomp attacks and they lose their impact hits. Huge amount of defensive power that you get from that spell. So given that Orcs and Goblins have access to the Staff of Bodum or other items that can give you reliability and get you casting off, this is really nice. You're just not super likely to roll your spells. You maybe have to take a couple of Wizards in Elementalism to make sure that you're getting the spells that you need. Illusion. This is an interesting one. I don't know that I love Illusion for Orcs and Goblins, especially because it only comes on the back of Night Goblin casters. So this is really good for a control play style. So again, if you're going sort of bricks of infantry and then gunline behind it, but you're worried about dealing with things like dragons, for example, it gives you the ability to put Miasmic Mirage onto them or Column of Crystal. Make it so that you're not just going to lose your units when they charge you, because you're stopping them from charging you. It's fine. I really like Illusion when I can lean into some sort of spectral doppelganger shenanigans, or the -1 to hit makes a huge difference. So you could put this caster into a unit of Black Orcs, give them -1 to hit on top of whatever layer of buffs you're putting on them. Unfortunately, you're going to stick out the side because you're a different base size, so it's very easy to kill the caster, which does worry me a little bit. So it is something you can lean into, but it's maybe not the one that I'm looking at initially. And like I say, it supports a gun line well. Next up, we've got the bespoke lore, Troll Magic. Now, Troll Magic I do like. Obviously, if you're in Troll Horde, you're probably taking this. This is giving you access to big smarts, which gives you reroll to stupidity tests. Stupidity can be more punishing. You need to make sure you're on the objectives or aggressively pushing towards your opponent. It has had a couple of spells dropped in sort of value in terms of dropped in casting value, not actual relative value, including rapid regeneration, which gives you the plus, the 5-up ward regen save, which is a really nice buff to have. And again, you can layer that on top of a ward save as well if you want to make one unit really, really tanky. They do layer defenses the best. If you're playing in Troll Horde, you can take a unit of, for example, Bboys, something that's got a little bit more speed, some really good punch to them. Trolls have, moderate speed and good punch, but the Bboys give you some more range to threaten with, gives you an option to get in there, do some more damage. You can hit them with the Ravenous Regeneration? Rapid Regeneration, giving them that 5-up rerollable regen save. Just a really nice defensive buff. And also just bricks of infantry. You can't take the best bricks of infantry in Troll Horde, but if you are doing that, or if you're paying for it using the magic item that lets you, roll spells on the Troll Magic lore, that's one way to go. Unfortunately, it's not extremely common, so if you are in Grand Army using Troll Magic, you're going to be rolling your spells, so there is a level of inconsistency there. And you can only have one wizard that has Troll Magic if you're doing that, because you don't get to, take multiple of them because it's not extremely common. Wild Magic is my go-to if I want to be offensive, which makes sense given the name. So, it is good for violence. It is good for violence because of Evil Sunshining, and here we go. These two spells give you extra AP and rerolling ones to hit on your attacks, so just a really nice offensive buff. And here we go gives you additional range on your charges, and also additional range on your declarable range of charges. So you can have infantry that can charge up to 13 inches. You're not realistically going to make the 13-inch charge, but it gives you just extra reliability if you're going for like a 10-inch charge. If you're playing against someone who's, maybe you're playing against elves and they've got 1 extra inch of movement, so they were set at 10.5 inches away to threaten you so they could, go for the charge next turn. Now that you have Here We Go, you can do the same thing to them. You can outrange enemy infantry very nicely, and just getting more consistency there is good. Wild Magic, I think, is one of the best lores to just dry roll in, and by that I mean not taking lore familiar, so you're just taking a caster or two with a specific lore. I really do like Wild Magic for that, because there's so much good stuff in there. The Magic Missile is really nice. It's just good at doing wounds to dragons. I'm expecting to see dragons still. There's a lot of stuff in there that I'm happy to have. If you've been watching these videos as they come out daily, you'll have seen me talk about infantry every time, and this is an army that's really important to think about infantry, so I'm definitely not going to skip it. Now, what are the changes for infantry? The big ones that we have to know about that affect every army: press of battle, massed infantry, parry. These affect Orcs and Goblins pretty much across the board incredibly well. Black Orcs do miss out a little bit in terms of parry, but across the board you're very happy to have these, and it makes your quite cheap models much more, much harder to remove in melee. Press of battle, this is the rule that gives you 2 fighting ranks. How does it work? As long as you haven't charged or pursued, remember that pursuing counts as charging, you have a 2nd rank of attacks. Your fighting rank goes from being the front rank to becoming 2 ranks, and that's only if you haven't charged or pursued. Great stuff there. It means that we're going to actually get some more attacks in if we are charged by cavalry, because we are tankier as well. From parry, we'll get to in a second. We're more likely to get attacks back, and obviously if you're buying spears, this does give you a 3rd rank of attacks. Massed infantry. Now, if you are an infantry unit and you outnumber your opponent in terms of unit strength, you get +1 combat res. Very nice. Orcs and Goblins, they do cheap infantry better than pretty much anyone else, apart from 3 other armies. They do infantry some of the best. Parry saves. The way that parry works is if you're using a hand weapon and shield specifically, you get +1 to your armor save in combat on top of the +1 you were getting for your shield, up to a maximum of 3. So if you're wearing full plate, I'm sorry you don't get a better save, But if you were wearing heavy armor or light armor or no armor, and you've got a hand weapon and shield, you're getting a bonus there, and that's really nice. Your super cheap, Night Goblins with just hand weapon shield, they're suddenly up to a 5-up armor save. Your regular Goblins, they're up to a 4-up armor save. Just a really nice buff, making sure that you've got a lot more reliability in terms of defense, and when you're standing on top of objectives to score, your opponent's going to have a harder time pushing you off. Weapon selection, this has changed as well. This is, when you go to combat, you go to step 1.1 and you choose which weapon to use. That doesn't just happen on the first round of combat. This happens every time. So you can receive a charge with hand weapon shields if you want to try and tank it, use that better armor save. Then you can swap over to great weapons or, halberds or spears or whatever you might be equipped with. Plenty of options there. Always good to have a couple of different pieces, but just some nice flexibility, and Orcs and Goblins are an army that are happy to have that level of flexibility. Maybe you're not using it too much because the units that might want to swap between weapons, looking at you, Black Orcs, can just use a mixture of them both, but still, nice to have the option there. Also, we've talked about the Pig Sticker and Acrotax, just in terms of you can only use weapons that when you charge, you get the bonus, you can only use it against the unit you charged. Now, Infantry, Black Orcs and Night Goblins. Why are these two units the ones that I've been picking out the most? Well, Black Orcs were a unit that was pretty good anyway. If there was an infantry unit that was being played before the 1.5 FAQ changes, it was inherently broken in some way. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm not talking about it being gamey, but for things to be good competitively, it usually has to have some broken aspect to it. And in this case, Black Orcs could have a 3-up armor save while still hitting you with great weapons. They had Furious Charge. They were relatively cheap for what they do. You can stack, really good buffs on them. You can give them the big red raggedy flag, get them up to weapon skill 5. It gives them extra combat res as well. Black Orcs were already a pretty solid unit, and you could equip them pretty comfortably with a variety of options. Night Goblins, they carry Fanatics. They were really good at carrying Fanatics. They could also do loads of shooting. They can't do the shooting anymore, but now they still carry Fanatics, and they're very cheap, and they stand on objectives. And there's magic items that you can give to the characters that will go in the units, because you have to buy Night Goblin characters to actually purchase Night Goblin units. But you can make them immune psychology. You can give them fungus wine, which means that they're actually going to stand on objectives instead of running away from the scary terror-causing dragons. Just great stuff. I really like both of these units, and if I'm building around Grand Army, I'm definitely going to be looking at these two units in my core as my basis, and I'm probably going to be spending more than 500 points on them. I'm pretty happy to look at spending maybe 1,000 points, depending on how I want to build the list, but you've got a lot more value in your core than a lot of armies, so Orcs and Goblins really like the infantry changes. Last up for these slides, let's talk about the changes to dragons. I mean Wyverns. Combat res change. You used to get a close order combat resolution bonus if you were unit strength 5 or more. Now it's gone to unit strength 10 or more. If you're riding a monster, your unit strength is the number of wounds you have on your combined profile, so an Orc on a Wyvern is only 7 wounds. You don't get that +1 to combat res. This is a nerf, and it is a little bit of an issue for, big ridden monsters, but less of an issue for Wyverns, which we'll get to. Challenge changes. Now, this is a real big one, because the way that it worked previously was if you went into a challenge, you killed your opponent, you'd then continue making attacks to max out overkill, so you can actually stack up some combat resolution. Now what happens is you make all of your attacks at initiative step, and if your opponent dies at that initiative step, you do not move to the next initiative step to make attacks. So if you had, for example, 5 attacks... Let's say you had loads of attacks in Initiative 4 and some attacks in Initiative 3. If you killed it halfway through the Initiative 4 step, you still make the rest of the attacks, but you don't move to the next step. Why is that a problem for Wyverns? Wyverns have a Poison Tail, which is a strikes first poison attack. So I don't think I've ever wounded anyone with that die before. I'd always just fail to hit with it. Now I think I'm going to kill my opponent's unit champion every time with a poison attack, and that's a problem because it means that you stop making attacks, which is, not good at all. It also sucks because the best weapon generally for an Orc riding a Wyvern is a great weapon, but if you do that, the Wyvern's going to make all of its attacks before you get to attack with the great weapon. And again, that's a problem because a Wyvern has very few attacks that are good. It has 1 poison attack, it's got a few, strength 6 AP2 attacks, which are fine, don't get me wrong, they're fine, but you're losing the 5 attacks at strength 7 AP3 from the great weapon if you are going to kill a unit champion. So, not great, and that is a problem, but I still think Wyverns are really good. which we'll get to in a second. Oh yeah, and then we'll go through the rest of these. Large target changes. This is a buff to you. It's harder for you to be shot off the table. You know, people aren't bringing poison shooting bricks. Poison changes, just going there as well. Put oof at the end because poison is a big issue for the Wyvern. You're likely to get that strike's first attack off, and it's not the poison that makes the difference, but it's just worth remembering. Multiple Wyverns with triple saves. Now this is kind of true. You have to go a little bit weird with it. You can have multiple saves against shooting, where you use the hero shield. I think it's called the 30-point shield that gives you a 5 at ward save against shooting attacks, or you can just go with charm shield. Obviously, we're talking about giving potentially a black orc on the back of a Wyvern trollhide trousers, giving them an extra +1 to their armor save and a ward save. Regen save. You're capped at a 3-up armor save as well, which is a real downside because previously you were one of the armies that were able to get 2-up saves on ridden monsters. So this is worse than it was in terms of what you could bring before, but everyone's a little bit worse in terms of what they could bring before for ridden monsters. Why do I think Wyverns are still fine? I think Wyverns are still fine because you can take 2 of them very cheaply. If I'm looking at using ridden monsters, I'm going to run 2 of them right next to each other. One of them's going to get challenged out, the other one's going to do all of the work. And other armies have to spend their entire character allowance to do that. You can do that for about 600, 650 points, depending on how much you want to juice up your unit. So I think Wyverns come out kind of well in the wash because you're just going to always run them around in a buddy system. You're going to run 2 of them, they're going to move around together, one's going to get challenged out, that's fine. Maybe, you don't even worry about putting 2 Black Orcs on the back of the Wyverns. Maybe you go 1 unit of Black Orcs, 1 Black Orc Wizard. Sorry, try that again. Maybe you go 1 Black Orc on the back of a Wyvern, and then you maybe go a Wizard on the other one. Now, Wizards on Wyverns are worse than Wizards on Dragons, because you've only got the heavy armor save from the Wyvern, so you've only got a 5-up armor save. You can't buy them the Trollhide trousers, so you can't give them regen. I'm not super in love with that there. You can only give them a ward save, but it is an option, so you can be aggressive forwards and still have a dispel threat. Okay, it's been a hot minute since we've looked at the actual detachments here for Orcs and Goblins, so let's have a quick refresher on what the detachments do, the armies of infamy, before we get into the list building segment of this. Nomadic War. You can take 0 to 1 Black Orc War Boss or Big Boss per Black Orc Boar Chariot. This makes sense. Then we've got War Bosses and Weird Knobs 0 to 1 per 1,000 points, so you can theoretically have as many War Bosses as you want here. Big Bosses, Weird Boys, Goblin Bosses, and Goblin Shamans are all uncapped as well. Core, you can have uncapped Wolf Rider mobs and Wolf Chariots. Orc Bosses unlock Bboys. Black Orc Bosses unlock Black Orc Boar Chariots, depending on which one is your general. So you're a little disincentivized from taking a Black Orc War Boss in Nomadic War because you probably want to take a decent sized unit of Bboys. Special, you can have Bboys, Boar Chariots, Snotling Pump Wagons, and then in rare you've got the Boar Chariots and Giants there. Plus you do get access to the really nice Black Orc Chariot for your mounts in this detachment. Rules-wise, you get the ability to give Goblin Wolf Rider mobs ambush at +1 point per model. This is something I was I didn't really care too much about, but now I do like a lot, because having core scoring units with ambush means that you can keep them safe in the early game for late game scoring, or you can come on and destroy your opponent's baggage train very easily. You can lower the number of drops very easily. You can also take Kicknick in this detachment, which gives you a +1 -1, so ambush has gained a lot of value, and Nomadic War does ambush very well. Hit 'em fast and hit 'em hard. All of the boars gain impact hits 1. Great, more damage is good. Impact hits happen before we, go into the challenge step, so being able to potentially decimate the front rank could make a difference in terms of being able to be challenged out, just if you kill enough stuff that you can thin things out. Anyway, impact hits are good, basically. Also, the Vanguard special rule for 1 point per model for 0 to 1 unit of Bboys per 1,000 points. Probably not bothering to do that anymore, because you can't charge. Hunting packs. Goblin Wolf Riders can change Open Order and Skirmish into Close Order and Horde. This is interesting. You can actually bring a combat res brick of Goblin Wolf Riders, which is very weird to say. Now, keep in mind that Cavalry don't get 2 ranks of combat res. Normally you get 2 ranks for infantry. They give you +1 to combat res for each rank. You only get 1 rank for cavalry, so Horde gets them up to a 2nd rank's worth of combat resolution in combat, which is nice. Close Order obviously gives them combat res as well. So if you wanted to go for a big brick of goblins to maybe try and win on combat res, this is something that you could lean into. All your characters have to be mounted, that's fine. And Black Orc bosses do not give Quell Impetuosity, which is a shame, because this is going to be... You have no way around the full send other than a specific magic item. But that's okay, because it's Nomadic War, so you probably wanted to play quite quickly. On to Troll Horde. If we look at the characters here, we've got 0 to 1 War Boss or Weird Knob per 1,000 points, the standard that you'd see in the Grand Army. And then you can have Big Bosses, Weird Boys, Goblin Bosses, Shamans, and Troll Hags, all very nice there, as uncapped just up to your character limit. Core, you have to take at least 1 Troll Mob per 1,000 points. You can take additional Troll Mobs for every Troll Hag taken. So you could go, if you're at 2,000 points, if you have 1 Troll Hag, you can take 3 units of Troll Mobs in Core. And then you can take Orc Mobs, Goblin Mobs, Spider Riders, and Wolf Riders. All good stuff there. Into Special, you can take more Trolls, Goblin Wolf Chariots, Bboys, Boar Chariots, and then Rare, you can have Giants as well. All decent stuff, and the rules that we get here, this is the sort of thing that really makes a big difference. Enhanced Regeneration, you get the Regeneration, if you have the Regeneration spell, if you have the Regeneration special rule in Troll Horde, you can reroll any failed regeneration saves by non-magical attacks. So against flaming attacks, because all of your regen sources, or almost all your regen sources, are flammable, you would get no regen. If your opponent's got magical attacks, you get to make the first regen save. But if they're not flaming or magical, you're making 2 regen saves for every wound suffered, which is really nice. This way, you can have Orc Shamans, Goblin Shamans, and Troll Hags passing their leadership on instead of the Trolls using their own, which is good. And Troll Tongue, you can use the Troll Lore of Magic as well in this detachment, which makes sense. And that's one of the big draws. So let's just have a very quick look at that one as well. The main draw for Troll Magic is Big Smart. This is a ranged self spell, so you can cast it on yourself, meaning you can cast it in combat, remains in play, and friendly units in command range reroll stupidity tests. But given that you take stupidity tests before you cast your spells, if you had already failed the stupidity test, you then can immediately make that test again. So just gives you a bit of reliability in terms of having more trolls that are less likely to fail stupidity. There's a couple of magic missiles and assailments in here which are fine. There's Troll Brains, which debuffs enemy leadership by 1, which is a really nice debuff, and it also gives them stupidity, which isn't likely to do something, but on the off chance it does, is very punishing for your opponent. But lowering their leadership by 1 is nice, because if you win combat, they're more likely to break and flee. Ravenous Recourse, this is a big part of the lore if you're playing Troll Horde. It gives you a lot of movement, so especially if you're in marching column, that +2 movement is huge, but it only affects models with stupidity. And then the other big one here is Rapid Regeneration, giving a unit flammable and regeneration 5+. So you can safely take something like a big unit of Bboys or a unit of Orc Boys, whatever you want to lean into, give them a 5-up regen, and because you're in the detachment, you'll get to reroll the 5-up regen as well. So you can make a unit very, very tanky. So, speaking of Troll Magic, let's have a look at Troll Horde. This is really fun. I like the Armies of Infamy for Orcs and Goblins. They play in a really fun way, and you play in a very different way to how you would play, the Grand Army, which I think is nice. So, starting off into core, you have to have at least 2 units of trolls, and you can go small on those and then do other things, or you can go big on them. I'm going to go big here. I think if you're playing Troll Horde, you're probably looking to play trolls, but there are things that you can do with trolls outside of that. So, there's different units of trolls we can go for here. So, we've got the common trolls. These are just your standard move 6, strength 5, T4, 3 wounds, 3 attacks. Terrible leadership. Okay initiative for a troll. And then you've got all your special rules that you'd expect here. Armor Bane, regeneration, yada yada. 6-up armor save, because they've got the light armor. This is a unit that you never take. You always spend either 4 points more for the Stone Troll or 8 points more for the River Troll, and I always go to the River Troll. Stone Troll gives you a slightly better armor save. You've got +1 here, Armored Hide, which gives you additional +1 to your save. You've got Magic Resist 1 as well, so you're a little bit tankier in terms of a better armor save and harder to cast spells on. You're also lower initiative and slightly better leadership, not that that matters too much. River Trolls, however, River Trolls have a 4th wound. That's it. They're paying 8 points more for a 4th wound, and I'm going to take that every day of the week. I really like that. I think that's the best way to go. They're super tanky. Because you're rerolling your regen, you really care about the number of wounds you have, so that 4th wound breakpoint, really, really solid. And again, I'm just going to be taking these with great weapons. They've got initiative 1, so I'd rather have attacks with AP than slightly more attacks that are good strength but don't have any chance of getting through armor. So let's just go 2 units of 6 River Trolls, and we're still under on core, because for Troll Horde you need to go at least 660 points in core, 1/3, sorry. But yeah, I'll come back and have a look at that a little bit later on. Then we've got a couple of options. So you can do a very cheap Wyvern Lord. So if we go here, give them Great Weapon, Heavy Armor Shield, a Wyvern, and then we're going to give them a Charm Shield for once per game, 5-up ward save, and also a Trollhide Trousers. Trollhide Trousers are the best, one of the best magic items in the game. +1 to your armor save, and it gives you a 5-up regen special rule, which, remember, because we're in Troll Horde, you re-roll that one. Let me just take off the shield here, I've given him 2. But for 292 points, you can have a character with triple save, and a once per game 5-up ward save on top of that. So really, really tanky, hits really hard. You've only got a weapon skill 6, but you've got 4 attacks plus Furious Charge, your strength 5, you've got the Great Weapon, you've got War here, so you can get rerolls of 1 and extra combat res on a key turn. Just a load of really great rules in there for Orc War bosses. And you can take 2 of these. We're not going to, unfortunately, because what we are going to do is we're going to go Ogdra's Swamp Digger. And in Troll Horde, your Orc War bosses and Orc Weird Knobs are capped at, 0 to 1 per 1,000 points, and Ogdra's is, unfortunately, an Orc Weird Knob, so you can't take 2 Wyverns and him. Why are we taking Ogdra's? Because Ogdra's is nuts good. So, he's got a few rules. First of all, he's got the Troll Caller, which is just the Troll special rule, basically. So he allows Troll mobs within command range to use his leadership instead of their own. This is just the same as the Troll Horde, special rule that allows wizards to pass their leadership on, but it means you can take him outside of Troll Horde if you wanted to take trolls for another reason. Protect a boss, this is look out sir, but you only have to be near trolls. There's no unit strength requirement as well, so a single troll will keep you safe, which is really nice against shooting and spells. Finally, the big thing, Siphon Strength. If you're within 3 inches of a unit strength 6 or more troll unit, which is, any unit of 2 or more models, and they're not fleeing, you get +1 to your casting roll. Previously, Ogdra's was about as good as a level 4 wizard. Now he's better, because he's casting at +3, whereas no other level 4 wizard that you have access to have that as the baseline. So, really nice there. He's very cheap. He's 195 points. He knows 3 spells. He's got Lore Familiar, so he picks the spells. He's very tanky. He's got the Trollhide Shawl, which gives him an armor save and a regen save, which he gets to reroll because you're in Troll Horde. Just a really nice piece, and he also hits kind of okay. He's got I think it's basically a great weapon with his 2 attacks. It doesn't want to load. It's basically a great weapon. Anyway, so the big thing as well with this guy is that he picks spells from 2 laws. He knows spells from the following laws of magic: Elementalism, Torrent Magic. He's the only caster in the game that has the option to pick from 2 laws, as far as I'm aware. This is something that's been in the game for over a year now, so I assume they're okay. Games Workshop's okay with this being the thing. People will have asked them about it in the FAQ. It hasn't been FAQ'd at all, so he does just get to pick from Elementalism and Troll Magic, which means you're probably going to be taking something like Big Smarts, Ravenous Regeneration, and then also one of the great spells from Elementalism, which doesn't want to load right now, but trust me, they're great. We've talked about them already. So Ogdra's is an auto take. It's a pretty decent leadership there. We've got the Orc War boss here, who's also 8. You're just going to have to trust me on that one, because it's not going to load up. But potentially we make Ogdra's the general here, because having the greater sized leadership bubble to pass on to the trolls is quite nice. Now, we could put some other stuff in here. The Troll Hag, I think unfortunately the Troll Hag has gone down in value. Previously, I would take a level 1 Troll Hag with Troll Magic, I'd take Big Smarts, and then even if I failed to fail my stupidity, I'd cast the Big Smarts on the Troll Hag, get the reroll, and have the additional chance of passing the stupidity test. Now you can't cast spells. I think the Troll Hag is maybe a little bit, I don't know, I'm worried about taking them, so we're going to leave that for now, and we'll just have a look at what else we can take. I really like Bboys in this sort of list. A big stonking unit of Bboys with full command. We'll make them cav spears, heavy armor, shields, big uns. We're also going to give them a magic standard. My go-to is the Banner of Butchery, which gives them +1 to strength, and that means that they are strength 6, AP -2, armor being 1, 2 attacks each. They've got Furious Charge. They hit real hard. The boars as well, I think, get up to strength 5 or something with the layered buffs in there. There are a few things that you can take in terms of upgrades. Potentially, you might want to give this unit the Thinking Orcs hat, just so they're not impetuous, gives you a bit more reliability with them. I wouldn't hate that, so we're just going to stick that on here as a starting point as well. Okay, so we've got a big unit of Bboys to try and crush enemy infantry. We've got 2 units of River Trolls to try and hold our objectives. What else do we want to fit in? I don't think that a Giant's particularly good ever, unfortunately. And kind of running low on options here. So in my mind, I think we want to fill up with more core and more characters. And at which point, I know I've just said that I think the Troll Hag has some issues, but what we're going to do is we're going to try and keep it in Ogdra's defensive radius. So, Troll Hag, if you give the Troll Hag a Lore Familiar, not Lore Familiar, sorry. If you give the Troll Hag a Talisman of Protection, you end up with a unit that is disgustingly hard to remove, disgustingly resilient, you could say, because it does come in with its own 5-up armor save from a heavy armor, it's got a 5-up ward from the Talisman, it's got a 5-up regen, 5-up regen. It also has a really poor weapon skill, but it is -1 to be hit in combat as well. One of these rules that I have forgotten. Maybe Slimy Shanks? Yes, -1 to be hit in combat. So you'll never be hit on 2s, which is nice, because you do have weapon skill too. And then you've got a really good, set of attack rolls in terms of Motherly Love, I think it is. Yes, the actual, it's like a Giant's attack table, but it's actually good. There's a large blast template, which was not great, but has got better, because now people are going to be running bigger units of infantry. Mother, which is just flat wounds with no armor or regen saves, and then Mither, which is flat hits with no armor saves. All of these are really nice to get, depending on the situation you're in, and you're very tanky, and you've got D6 stomp attacks. You are a behemoth, so you're going to be hitting them at strength 6 AP2. Just a nice unit to have, relatively cheap again. 265 points for a level 1 wizard with Talisman of Protection is honestly a bargain, in my opinion. That leaves us with about 300 points, and I think the obvious thing to do is just to go more trolls. So maybe we go something like 5 trolls here, or what if we went 4 trolls here, and then we went a unit of 2 stone trolls. No, not quite enough points for those. Okay, so we can go 4 trolls here, drop the Bboys down slightly, and then go 2 stone trolls. Why do I like a unit of 2 stone trolls? Well, if you take them, they are a good defensive piece for Ogdras. You just put them in marching column, you keep them, next to Ogdras, and that will help keep them safe. Although I haven't given them any weapons here, so if we give them great weapons, that puts us 6 points over. And I'm just going to drop the Musician off the Bboys, take us to a flat 2,000 points. So this is the sort of list that I might be looking to play if I'm playing Troll Horde. You've got 3 very tanky scoring units that, if you fail your stupidity test when you're on the objective, can't be moved. You've got a big unit of Bboys to do some damage. You're going to cast Ravenous Regeneration from Ogdras onto them to make sure that they don't fall over. Stone Trolls to defend Ogdras, and then you've got a Troll Hag and a Wyvern to go out and do some beating themselves. Nomadic War. This is the only way you can get 3 Wyverns into a list, as far as I'm aware. I don't think there's any other way of doing it. So let's build that out, see what that looks like. Because if we go for example, a unit of Black Orc, a Black Orc Warboss on Wyvern and we're just going to keep them nice and cheap. We're going to give them, where have you gone? Trollhide Trousers here, and a Charm Shield. That's going to be our default loadout. Makes sure they're not too expensive. Then we go for an Orc Warboss, great weapon, heavy armor, Wyvern, and Charm Shield and Trollhide Trousers, nice and easy. That leaves us with 394 points available. So, I think I'm always going to want a Wizard. Can I fit another Orc Warboss and Wyvern in and a Wizard? I don't think so, but let's just double check. So, Weird Knob on foot. It's got to be on War Magic. 238. Okay, so I think if we went down this route, we wouldn't have enough for a third. Yeah, we wouldn't have enough for a third one here. So I think what we're going to do is let's look at what the Wyvern boss looks like. I did mention that I don't think this is a great way of doing it, but if you want to go down the triple Wyvern route, I still think you want some sort of magic defense. So maybe this is the sort of thing that you would build out. So we'll go Lore Familiar, we'll go Talisman of Protection, and honestly, I don't know that we need anything else here. I think this is absolutely fine. The Warboss itself doesn't have many attacks. It's only got 2. I don't think we need to give it a magic weapon. So, yeah, this is relatively tanky, and it's 330 points. So we could fit this in pretty well. So I'm not going to go down the line of triple Wyvern, but if you did want to go down the line of triple Wyvern, this is probably the sort of loadout you want to go for, and you could potentially put some extra points in. You've got the general here. It does mean that you'd have to take a Boar Chariot, or, well, you could take a Boar Chariot, but you couldn't take Bboys in your core slot, which I do worry about. So what I'm going to say is let's take out these and let's make this the general, the Orc Warboss on Wyvern, and then we want to go a big unit of Bboys in core. Again, just looking at the same sort of loadout that we had before, Banner of Butchery, the Thinking Orcs hat, though we may drop that here. Biggin, shields, heavy armor, cavalry, spears. Again, we've just got a good punchy unit there that we're going to be able to rely on. I think let's go double Orc Warboss and Wyvern. I think that's a really nice way to load out. Like I mentioned before, if I'm running sort of these monstrous, characters on monsters, I want to have them running around in a pair so that they can't get challenged out easily, and this way they're going to be able to get into a unit and crunch them pretty successfully. I do like running additional units of Bboys in this sort of list, so let's have a look at one in special. We don't have to be quite as many models. We can go full command here. The second banner is... It's hard to choose. There's so many really good banners here. Despite a banner giving you poison is less good than it was. The Angry Lads flag gives you frenzy, which is fine. I don't love it. It's okay. The War banner is probably my go-to in that it gives you a more threatening unit. You increase your charge range and your charge declarable range, at which point we're going to go cav spears, heavy armor, shields as well. You can't have a second unit of Biggins, so in fact what we're going to do is we're going to make this unit Biggins, and we're going to take Biggins off the core unit, and that means that both units are strength 5 on the charge. Just gives you a bit more consistency with how your army's going to play. What else do we want to put in here, because we've not spent too many points. I think if we're going down the Nomadic War route, Kicknick is a really nice choice because he gives you a lot of things here. So all sneaky like, this gives you the +1 or -1 to the roll when you're trying to deploy ambushes for the goblins there. He can ambush himself. He's got a pretty decent weapon. The Skull Smasher here is either strength +2, AP -1, armor bane 2, or you can do multiple wounds here at strength but AP 2. It's a bit of a... I don't really understand why the multiple wound profile doesn't give you plus strength, but here we are. Here we are. There are 2 different profiles you can go for, depending on which you like, and he would like to go with some Goblin Wolf Riders. So, I think we probably go for a couple of units to go into reserve in terms of scoring, and let's say that we're going to go 8 with a boss and a musician, and we'll give them short bows. Can we give them... We can't give them short bows and cav spears, can we? Let's have them have cavalry spears so they can do something when they come on. And we don't need to give them feign flight or reserve move. Yeah, so we'll go for 2 units like this. One with the free ambushes from the detachment and one with paid ambushes. And then let's also go with a bigger brick of Goblin Wolf Riders, which we're going to try and have holding objectives to some degree. I'm not sure how effective this is going to be, but I think it's an interesting way to build around. So we're going to give them light armor, we're going to give them close order and horde, and this is the unit that Kicknick's going to join into. So plenty of Wolf Riders here. Now, do we have any magic support? We don't have any magic support yet, and we can't take an Orc, but we can take a Goblin. And I think let's go Goblin Oddnob, and we'll go here on a Giant Wolf. This list really benefits from War Magic because you're getting that full send output, so just giving them the ability to go further is really nice. So let's just go... We don't want to go Lore Familiar. One of the best spells that we can get, which we haven't even talked about yet, is Itchy Nuisance. It's a Hex, 15-inch range, cast on a 9, so it's a little unreliable, but -3 D3 to the toughness and initiative of the enemy unit. So what we're going to go with is we're just going to say, let's definitely get that spell off, go for a Staff of Badoom, and also go for a Power Scroll. Do we need Power Scroll? I think Power Scrolls are excessive. I kind of want a Power Scroll. No. We'll go like this, and let's also maybe... Yeah, I don't think we need any Dispel additional threat there. Honestly, I don't know that we need anything else on this model. I think we just want to use it as a force multiplier to try and get... Here we go. So we'll go for a level 4 wizard so we can roll more spells and then swap into... picking up Itchy Nuisance is going to be really strong. That leaves us with 125 points here, and honestly, 125 points, maybe we just tweak some points around, and we go for a frenzied unit of Bboys. They don't hit anywhere near as hard, in my opinion, as the regular ones that you upgrade with banners, but you can only have 2 banners per, 2,000 points, 1 per 1,000 points there, so maybe we just go 7 with basically no upgrades. Give them they've got a 5-up save from the shield and the armored hide. They've got frenzied. I don't really want to pay for war paint, and they just hit really hard, and that puts us a point over. So we just have to drop a bit of command somewhere. which I think would probably be Musician off these Bboys. So yeah, there's a rough sort of list that you might want to play with Nomadic War. You've got a Wyvern, so they fly around together. You've got Kicknick, who is giving you the ability to bring your ambushes on more or less reliably as you'd like. The Goblin to force multiply, hopefully you get Here We Go and Evil Sun Shining, making you hit a bit harder, making you more likely to get your charges off, increasing your charge range, debuffing the toughness of the enemy with Itching Nuisance. Big unit of Bboys that's going to do a lot of damage here with a Banner of Butchery. 2 units of Skirmish, Hiding, Ambush off the board, scoring core. Just really nice to have that fast cav that can stay off the board for as long as you want, or not as long as you want, but for a while. And then the big brick of combat res that Kicknick's going to join. I'm not sold on this one, but I think it's worth trying, and it's relatively cheap. 232 points, it's mobile, it's got a lot of combat res in there, and it hits an okay amount, and it's only weapon skill 3 as well, so you're not going to be hitting on, being hit on 2s all that often. Finally, a couple of units of Bboys here, one that hits reasonably hard, and then one that just is there for frenzy, no banner, not risking giving anything up, but each model has 3 attacks, so it can paste some skeletons or zombies or something like that quite easily. Last but not least, we've got Grand Army, and this is, I think, probably still going to be the strongest way to play, and there's a very easy way to build this out. You can do a lot of stuff with this, but I'm just going to go with what my sort of default is going to be, and you'll see that points fill out very quickly, because we're going to go with 30 Night Goblins with full command. I'm just going to keep them hand weapons shield. I'm going to give them 3 fanatics, and I'm going to do that 3 times. You can do it 4 times, but I think 3 is probably about where we want to fit in. Maybe we look at doing a 4th one later on down the line if we need to. Then we're going to go with some Black Orcs, and I want to go for a big beefy unit that's going to hold objectives pretty well, and I want to take a Black Orc character as well, so this is something that I'm going to be spending points on. I'm going to start with 24. I'm probably going to reduce the number of models that I have, and we're going to give them the big red raggedy flag, giving them the +1 to weapon skill, and also giving them +1 combat res. So, going to be very hard to deal with this unit. Speaking of, make them stubborn and veteran. Just, again, really double down on this plan, and I don't think we need to give them anything in magic items there. As always, if you've got if you've got the mob rule / motley crew, you use the you use the majority of the armor save. So you give half of them shields, half of them great weapons. You make sure that you've got the majority of the models in the fighting rank with shields, and you just go 6 wide, so you've got 3 and 3 or something like that. And the way that this works is you always use the better of the armor save, so half of them get to attack with great weapons, while the entire unit has a 3-up armor save, which is really strong. So again, we can remove points here, but we don't necessarily need to. We then want to go in terms of backline support. Doom Divers. Doom Divers are incredible. These things are war machines, they're stone throwers, but you get to redirect them, basically. You get to do this. This means that it's the only stone thrower in the game that gets to try and snipe characters that are, being protected. It's just very reliable, and I really like 2 of those. I'm also going to say let's start off with 2 rock lobbers as well. Maybe we take those out, but I think this is a decent way to build. We're putting like a good amount of artillery in the back line. I'm not sold that we're going to go with the bolt throwers, but let's put the bolt throwers in for now, because these are fairly cheap. They are, poor ballistic skill. They only have ballistic skill 3, so if you're shooting at long range, you're hitting on 5s, but if you've got 3 of them, that's average 1 hit a turn. And again, we might take these ones out. We'll come back and see. Into characters, you definitely want some sort of war boss, and I think if we're going for this sort of style, you don't necessarily need a war boss and Wyvern. You can go in that direction, but if you do go in that direction, you probably want 2. So I'm just going to say let's go for a Black Orc. Wow, maybe we just want the big boss BSB. We'll start off with, yeah, we're going to go for a Black Orc BSB. Very tanky. It's going to go in with the Black Orcs there, and what we'll do is we'll give them... They're pretty beefy already, so we'll give them a Trollhide Trousers and a Charmed Shield, and then we'll give them a Great Weapon as well. And what this does is it gives them a 2-up armor save, because they've got full plate, shield, and also Trollhide Trousers for a 2-up armor save if they use the hand weapon shield, or they can use the Great Weapon pretty comfortably, do some decent output there. We'll give them the War Banner, so they're bringing 2 combat res, and obviously they're going in with the Black Orcs, so if we're going an extra model, let's just drop 1 model here down to 23. And what else do we want to put in? Well, we definitely want, you know what? Let's drop down to 22, and let's support this with a Battle Magic Caster. So we'll go with an Orc Weirdnob here, and I think if we're going Battle Magic, we don't necessarily need to go level 4. We're just going to go Lore Familiar. I'm not worried about losing any of the Lore of Gork spells particularly. We'll take a single Power Scroll, and let's take Ruby Ring of Ruin. I am, when I'm building lists, liking taking wizards that have not just the ability to buff the unit they're in, but also some ranged output, so your opponent doesn't just get to ignore you entirely. We do need a general here, so that's got to be this character. And then we still need 3 Night Goblin characters, and there's a lot of ways you can do this, but let's just go with... Let's have a look at Night Goblin big bosses. So we could go Giant Cave Squigs here, which is cool, and these are random movers and kind of hard for your opponent to deal with, but because they're cavalry, you can't screen them with infantry, which means they'll probably get shot very quickly. So maybe we just go... Let's keep them cheap. Just keep them completely naked. Yeah, I'm actually not bothered if these die. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put them in the units of Night Goblins, and they're going to have a great weapon. They're going to provide a little bit more leadership, but also just potentially do some attacks as well. And that leaves us with 70 odd points here. And Black Orc War Boss or Black Orc Big Boss of the General. That is correct. I have incorrectly done that. So I think what we're going to have to do here is take the BSB off this character and add a BSB in separately. So we'll go Orc Big Boss, BSB, War Banner. Give them the Great Weapon, Heavy Armor, Charmed Shield, and Talisman of Protection. No, Troll Hide Trousers. There we go. Now the list can be legal. We'll make this the general. And that does put us over on points. So let's just tweak around here. How do we want to do this? Honestly, I think we just drop the bolt throwers. I think we drop all 3 of them, and then we maybe just upgrade the big boss on foot to a war boss. That might be the way to go. So if we go war boss, great weapon, troll high trousers, and also charmed shield, and then get rid of this big boss here, because all we wanted to do is upgrade that to a general. Yeah, perfect. And that still leaves us with some points here. Only 1 general allowed. I've clicked the wrong thing. Cool. So now the list is legal, which is important, and we have 45 points. So an easy thing to do is just put 1 of the bolt throwers back in, which is... Oh, God, I can't do maths. We have 37 points left. Okay, never mind. We could do something like put 1 of these on a cave squig with a light armor shield and just have it sort of behind a unit, out of line of sight. In fact, we'll upgrade this shield to a charm shield as well. And we can give it a cav spear instead. Yeah, something along these lines. Again, it doesn't have to be point to point, but this is sort of the general vibes that I'd be going for if I'm looking at playing Grand Army. You know, some sort of defensive unit. So I've got a big brick of Black Orcs here that are going to be able to take charges. They're going to have a 5-up ward save from the Orc Weirdnob. They've got extra output from the War Boss, great leadership from the War Boss. That's a really good solid anchor. You can flank it with units of Night Goblins, which are pretty unreliable in terms of themselves, but they can just drop the Fanatics, and they're also relatively, like, you know, they're putting out a decent amount of combat res. You can challenge out dragons that charge them, so you're probably going to win combats there. Decent leadership by the time you factor in Warband and Horde, just solid there, and then a good amount of artillery in the backlines. And again, these rock lobbers could probably go. Rock lobbers are not incredible, but we're seeing bigger units. Stone throwers, I think, have gone up in value from where they were, and rock lobbers were something I was considering already. So hopefully that's helped in terms of how you might want to start thinking about building together your armies for Orcs and Goblins, what might be good, what might be less good. Thank you for watching. Thank you for getting to the end of the video. If you've reached this point and you haven't already, I would really appreciate a like, a comment, a subscription if you haven't done those things. It just helps me get seen by more people, boost me up in the algorithm, all of the stuff that the YouTubers do like to say. If you would like to support me in my goal to become a full-time YouTuber, I would absolutely appreciate that. You can become a member below. There are various perks to those, name at the end of the videos, all that good stuff, but it also unlocks some VIP areas in Discord if you become a Longbeard or Ground Knight tier supporter. Those VIP sections are the only parts that are locked away in Discord. You don't have to be a member to join the Discord. I'd recommend that you should. We've got about 450, 500 people on there. It's a great place for discussion, a lot of fun. I do try and chime in as much as possible. And it's also where the Fix My List show lists are put, and also if you are one of the Grail Knight or Longbeard tier supporters, where you participate in choosing which list I play in the monthly Pick My List series.